we started off by talking about them having more traditional art schools at the turn of the century. And this is where modernism comes from, because the people who eventually became the modernists didn't like the way they taught here. So if you wanted to be an artist or an architect, you had to go through this academy, and you didn't really have flexibility to do much other than this type of more traditional painting, right? And if you look inside, and this is how they would train as well. If you were a woman, you traditionally could not go unless you were a woman posing in the center, and that's how you would learn, just by watching, but you couldn't even get licensed or become official. So very conservative type of school. And then this is what it looks like today. You can see the types of art that they have is like older, non-modern pieces. So eventually you get this group of artists called the Viennese Secessionists who decide to break away because they don't like the fact that they can't create the type of art they want. And if they can't create that type of art, then what's the point for them, right? And usually if you were to propose like a Picasso, they would have just never shown it or put it up. So what's the point of being an artist if you're not being, put up in galleries and being exhibited? So the Viennese Secessionists break away for that reason, and they commission their own gallery to show their work. And the type of work they're creating is somewhere in between Art Nouveau, which we see through Klimt here, so more of this like Art Deco type of piece. But then we also have more modernism kind of start to peek through different forms of using art. So we have these competing ideas. Some people stay within the Viennese Secessionists, and some people are even too radical for them, so they break away completely. Architecturally, because the architects train at that academy as well, once they break away, they begin to produce things like this, which you can see have more 90-degree angles, not a stuffy wooden, traditional bedroom. And then things like this, which looks like it could be created today. If you take away like maybe the analog clock, like it looks ultra modern, no ornamentation.
Looks like the train station.
Mm-hmm. It does look like the train station. And so they create this, which is their new gallery made by one of their architects. You can see the form is very different from neoclassical museums that have the colonnades and everything. It is cube, and then on the back it has two more cubes. And then they create this laurel, not a wreath, but a sphere in this case, which is usually a form of glory, like on emperors. So they put that on top to kind of crown themselves as being the new artists of the day.
You said it was a new museum or a nude?
New
Okay.
museum. It was created by one of their architects for their own group. And exterior looks a little Art Nouveau with the florals, with the gold, right? Totality in design everywhere. But then if you look at the inside, where you see the articulation of the four cubes and the center, it does look very modern. Polished concrete floor, no decoration, clean, easy to read, columns, structure, skylights. It's exactly what a modern gallery would look like today, absolutely no differences. So this is very radical, and you can even see the type of art that they still put inside of there. It's a modernist museum. So the way that we usually break it down is we have our Royal Academy, we have our secessionists, and then we have people like the guy I just talked about, Adolf Loos, who believed in like barbarianism stuff. He broke away from them, but in the end, the architects of these two created what we call transitional work, which that museum that I just showed you is an example, because it's modern, but then Art Nouveau at the same time. And they eventually lead to modernism, which has our two branches. Meanwhile, the people that stay in the Royal Academy just continue doing the same stuff we've been looking at.
Okay.
So modernism is very new and avant-garde at the time. It's not the norm. It's a very small group of people. So then the summary of modernism is these three things. Probably it's industrial materials. And it's not just using iron like Art Nouveau. It's fully expressing it as it comes straight out of the factory. So if it looks like an I-beam, it will be an I-beam in the architecture. You're not going to clad it or anything. And then what is it not? It's not any of these things, right? And as you saw, some of them have flat roofs, some of them have orthogonal massing, but not all of them. So it's wrong to, use these as a definition when all of modernist buildings actually do these three things. So it's more about the larger agenda of what they're trying to do. They also have a larger emphasis on the lower or working classes as well. They want everyone to have equal access to good design and a better life. So of those two branches, we have normative, which is the machine aesthetic, geometric forms, cubes, what we traditionally think of as being modern architecture. So we're going to start by looking at that branch, which begins in with Peter Behrens and his turbine factory. So it's a factory building, but if you look at it, he's inverting a lot of classical relationships. So it kind of has a temple pediment and then two columns if you kind of look at it. And traditional architecture tends to ground those corners to make it look stable. And here, although he's using the stone on the corners, he's using it inset, so it's not protruding out. Rather, it's set in, which is inversing the relationship of glass and stone. Usually, glass is kind of set back from the stone, it's punched into the wall, and then they put the frame. In this case, it's the opposite, and then they also round that corner. So he's making it look like a much more malleable and organic material, which kind of debunks this idea that it should be stable, harsh, nice corners to make it a good foundation. The curtain wall you can see comes out further as well, so the glass is again protruding. This is all just mullion, so no structural support is holding this up. It is just hanging off of the top of this, and then they're attaching it to here. But it's structurally not doing absolutely anything. Now the sides of it, he does try to use what looks like a classical colonnade, but if you notice, it's a lot thicker at the top, it gets thinner at the bottom, and then he has this really interesting little joint detail here, which in stone would be impossible. You usually need to have a very thick stone base for it to be stable, but Peter Behrens is exploiting the use of industrial materials, and he's really flaunting it, right? He wants you to know with the rivets, with this joint, bye, have a good weekend. He wants you to know that he's using, the newest technology, even if he is using still some classical proportions. On the inside, you can kind of see that, but if you look at it compared to the train station, it does look like it's a little bit, more fine, more elegantly designed than rather than just these regulated dirty bays. So there is architectural qualities in it, despite how industrial it is. And eventually we do have the three of the four major modernists come out of his office. So that's why he's often called the father of modern architecture, because his disciples are the three of the four major ones. So we have Gropius, who starts Bauhaus, Mies van der Rohe, the guy with the wall, and then Corbusier with his 5 points. So we're gonna start with Gropius, who designs this corner. Well, he designs all of this, but this is the famous corner, the Fagus factory, and he designs it as a response to Peter Behrens' turbine factory. So although he worked under him, he didn't necessarily agree with what he made, but what was he gonna do? He was an intern at the time.
Right.
So instead, he believes it should be much more dematerialized, right? So notice his corner is completely made out of glass, no supports, and it's now an asymmetrical composition. So there's absolutely no remnants of classical proportion in this at all. You can see the entrance is off to a side, it doesn't have a center pediment, it doesn't have grounded corners. Instead, he's completely flipping and inversing all these relationships. And notice that even where the floors are, he just covers it in black spandrel rather than articulating it as brick. So it's these full curtain walls going all the way down. Interiors are a little bit Art Nouveau because of the paint, but if you were to paint all of it white, it looks very modern, right? There's no decoration, nothing 3D about it. And then there's his famous corner. So if you notice, some of these have a thicker outline. That's because they're operable, and you can open them to let in ventilation, to let in air, sunlight. So early modernists had a lot of care for the environment, which you can see through their use of windows.
I think I got it from here.
Okay.